네, 오래 기다리셨습니다. 2021 차세대 미디어 주간 방송 미디어 미래 전략 컨퍼런스에 오신 여러분 진심으로 환영합니다. 저는 오늘 이 자리에 사회를 맡은 아나운서 장나연입니다. 반갑습니다. 네, 올 한 해는 유독 큰 사건들이 많았던 것 같습니다. 그래서인지 벌써 옷깃을 여미는 11월이 됐습니다. 코로나19와 쌀쌀해진 날씨 덕분에 외부 활동이 움츠려드는 이 시기에 이번 미래전략 컨퍼런스는 D.N.A.가 이끄는 미디어 산업의 혁신이라는 주제로 특별 강연, 토크 콘서트, 3개의 전문 세션으로 나눠서 이제부터 진행될 예정입니다. 마지막까지 여러분들의 뜨거운 관심과 성원 부탁드리겠습니다. 그럼 먼저 5G 플러스 X 통신, 미디어 콘텐츠 혁신 전략이라는 주제로 특별 강연을 진행해 보도록 하겠습니다. 버라이즌 글로벌부문 대표 팀 스티븐슨님 만나보겠습니다.
Hi, Korea Next Media Week 2021. Thank you for having me. My name is Tim Stevens. I am the global leader of strategic innovation for the media and entertainment space for Verizon. Verizon is a leading technology company, predominantly located in the U.S., but with global reach across all of Europe, Asia Pac, and really around the world. My role in particularly focuses in on media and entertainment. So as the global leader for strategic innovation, what I do is I spend an enormous amount of time with clients, helping them formulate a strategy, especially around business transformation. So as technology investors, what I help a lot of clients do is navigate some of the objectives that they're trying to build out in terms of their infrastructure or the objectives that they're trying to achieve, and where Verizon can play in terms of enabling a lot of those technologies and services.
네, 그렇다면 버라이즌의 5G 플러스 X의 전략은 무엇인가요?
So as you may have read, Verizon has spent a lot of time and effort as in focus, in particular and very specifically on 5G. We see 5G as a huge opportunity and certainly as the future of telecommunications. And when I think about our strategy, and there's a couple of things that come to mind. First off, most recently, we have acquired or in the process of acquiring significant C-band spectrum, which was redeployed from the FCC in North America as a vehicle to continue to expand our 5G coverage. In addition to that, because we feel so strongly about what 5G in particular will deliver, especially with regard to media and entertainment, we continue to do more and more pilots and proof of concepts to demonstrate the capabilities. And that goes from everything from new types of storytelling, think about it as immersive AR, VR, all the way through every back office or operational video work stream that you can imagine. And by continuing to trial and test in the marketplace, and continuing to develop the expertise with 5G, and in particular as well with mobile edge compute, we're continuing to see the opportunity for media companies to really change the way they operate. And whether that is for content contribution or for content distribution, whether it's inside studio work, whether it's delivery of that content, in particular to consumer groups, at every junction and every workflow, there is an opportunity to implement a 5G technology. Most importantly, the reasons around a lot of it have to do with two main components. First off, the super low latency and the extremely large bandwidth. And when you're working in video as media and entertainment executives, those two pieces are the most compelling aspects of migrating a lot of your work streams to a 5G infrastructure. If I can deliver broadband capabilities, 4K ultra high def video, and I can deliver it in sub 100 milliseconds from origination to destination, which is really what the spec of 5G will provide for. Well, then I can start to take constraints, a lot of different constraints out of my workflows. And if we think about as technology investors, the way we've executed in the past, for the most part, a lot of times we're always thinking about how much bandwidth the application, how far the bandwidth how far the application is from the source, what's the compute infrastructure, what are the constraints that we work within. And those constraints usually pattern along how we execute in the field. If I think of 5G as a way of eliminating all constraints, where I no longer have a bandwidth constraint, I no longer have a latency constraint, I can move compute right to the edge. Well, all of a sudden, I can reimagine how I do my work. And reimagining how you do media and entertainment work is probably the key component around 5G. And it's certainly the one strategy that we stay focused on when we think about Verizon and how we're developing it in country and in North America, and then where we can extend that reach and expertise around the globe.
한스 베스트버그 버라이즌 CEO는 지난 1월 11일 CES 2021 킥오프 키노트 강연에서 5G는 커뮤니케이션과 엔터테인먼트의 새로운 혁신의 장을 열 것이다라고 이야기를 하셨습니다. 방송 미디어 업계에서 5G 시대를 준비하려면 어떻게 해나가야 할까요?
So, and that's a great question. And, certainly I think working inside media and entertainment, we agree with Hans Vestberg very much. Um, One of the things that we're seeing, though, in particular, and it kind of draws back a little bit to something I said earlier, is that the way the broadcast industry should prepare is really first start to look at those core constraints that are preventing them from achieving certain performance and operational strategies. If you think about and we can talk about a couple of examples real quick, but if you think about some of the complexities in actually organizing a broadcast operation, the one thing that we're hearing from customers, at least in the US, time and time again, it's as less about let me create something new and disruptive. I think right now we're kind of inching into the technology, and that's okay because everybody's got to get comfortable with the technology. But if you take kind of the first cut and starting to get comfortable with how to execute, that's really step number one. Step number two is really to take full advantage of the mobile edge compute. And when I think of mobile edge compute and how that plays into 5G, and again, I start to think about how do I take constraints and how do I improve the latency of video broadcast. The one thing that you have to start to think about is deconstructing your applications. And what I mean by that is, we have for the past decade and maybe a little bit more migrated a lot of applications into the cloud. And typically they are sitting as part of our operation at a distance away from where we actually need those results to be displayed. In with 5G and more importantly with mobile edge compute, one of the things that you can start to think about is how do I deconstruct that application so that I can put the compute closer to where I need those results. So let me give you a perfect example. In a gaming industry, if I'm a gamer or if I'm an e-game video producer, or creating that experience, I might host everything in the cloud. So everything that happens inside that environment, especially when you're doing multiplayer environment, is going from wherever that consumer is out to the cloud and back. But imagine, if you will, that I broke up the application and I set it into login and credentials in one spot. And closer to the application, I created the rendering. And then at the application, I actually did all of the manipulation. I've really deconstructed the application and I've moved pieces of the application that have latency constraints closer to where they need to be and closer to where the variables are. And so now as I process that, I'm putting myself in a place where I can deliver better performance without burdening the cloud or the infrastructure to care for the speed at which I need to execute. That's the type of thing that you can think about. And then when you think about it within 5G in general, and then within more traditional broadcast operations, think about things like in traditional broadcast, the audience I'm sure will relate to some of this. As I'm delivering live news, as I'm delivering weather, as I'm delivering sports, I'm always applying some sort of treatment or application or bug or scroll or lift or a crunch, something that actually manipulates the video and provides a piece of information to the audience. All of that now I can do right at the edge. I can do things differently than I did them before. So when we think about how this will open up a new chapter for innovation, what we should really be preparing for is unpacking some of the operation constraints, looking at a way of facilitating and executing with low latency and taking incremental steps. Start with those first things that we already know from an operations perspective are a challenge and fix those. And as we fix them, we're going to get into a position where we've created an investment in technology that relieves any of the defects that we perceive inside our broadcast operation. We'll move into that next layer. Well, we'll actually start to execute to provide better content or more efficient ways of delivering content. And then beyond that, figuring out how to disrupt the marketplace. How do you make something unique from a storytelling perspective that only 5G and MEC can create because of the high bandwidth and the super low latency?
네. 다른 혁신들을 가능하게 하는 혁신 플랫폼이자 진정한 게임 체인저로서의 5G 플러스 X 시대 내용 중 버라이즌에서 진행 중인 방송 미디어 분야 접목 사례가 있다면 소개해 주실 수 있을까요?
So, although I won't talk very specifically about individual customers, what I can do is kind of scope out and frame for you what we're seeing executing in the field and where those use cases are coming into play. And so, and let's start, in the sports, because I think in the sports venues, there's a lot of things that we can talk about. We can talk about not only the field of play and the game, but also the production of it, and then what's happening inside of those stadiums and events. What we are seeing first off is the management of spectrum. And what I mean by that and where that use case comes into play is that often when you think about a game environment where you're producing a sports show, there are a couple of things happening simultaneously. There is a league that owns the officiation to make sure that the game is fair. There are broadcasters who are capturing as much information as they possibly can to share it with audiences. There are in the venue point of sale opportunities, signage. There is security. There are fans who are also capturing those moments and sharing them, with colleagues and friends. And with that, one of the challenges that we continue to see, excuse me, one of the challenges that we continue to see is the battle for spectrum. You cannot use Wi-Fi or other spectrum to care for all of that. The one use case that seems to be very relevant and common to a lot of folks is how do I start to slice up that spectrum and how do I enable pieces of it that are dedicated to very specific work streams? And we're starting to do that as one of those use cases where we are taking the concept of network slicing inside 5G. We are dedicating a bandwidth to broadcasters inside that environment so they can deliver that high volume, low latency video. We're dedicating a spectrum to point of sale. We're dedicating a spectrum to fans. We're dedicating a piece of spectrum to the officiating crews that are on the field so that they are isolated and can get all the right information. So one use case that we're seeing pop up rather frequently is the management of that spectrum. The other use case that we're seeing as well is the ability to then move video from an origination and do it and push it out to a broadcaster live to air. And when I have a 5G enabled venue as part of that kind of more broader stadium discussion, The one thing that we can do now is we can use that isolated spectrum dedicated to those cameras that are on the field and be able to pull those camera feeds directly out and go live to air. That typically doesn't happen. A lot of times we do use RF spectrum, but that gets very clunky very quickly and very limited. But now I can place an enormous amount of cameras, a number of cameras inside a field of play, and I can pull from them that super low latency, high bandwidth, so those 4K ultra high def, and go to live to air. We recently did a trial with a company in the US, and we were filming on behalf of one of our sports broadcasting partners the Big East tournament in Madison Square Garden. Madison Square Garden happens to be lit with 5G. The company who was providing the cameras was LiveView, and our sports partner there was Fox. And Fox was able to deploy cameras on the field connected to our 5G spectrum and go live right from there to air. And when you think about that capability, especially when you're thinking in that sub 100 milliseconds, you're really capturing an enormous amount of detail. And then if you extend that out, so now the moment you get 5G speed into that stadium and you extend that out for broadcast distribution, I can actually avoid satellite in terms of taking program, moving it up to satellite, and then delivering it to my consumers. Because if I can use 5G as an access point, I can do that. And again, that high speed, super low latency, get it into, in this case, into Verizon's intelligent edge network infrastructure, and then deliver that directly to whoever our cable head hens, our programmers, our MPVDs are for distribution into the home. If we think about the propagation and delay for satellite, that can add 6 to 7 seconds from broadcast origination to delivery. But if we can implement a strategy that leverages 5G, we can do all of that in under a second. And when you start to think about delivering news, sports, et cetera, in under a second, that all of a sudden becomes a very powerful use case. And I would say then the only other use case or one of the other use cases that sits out there is then also how do we care for the fans? How do we deliver back to the fans that same experience? So if you take the example I just gave you, where you're getting multiple camera feeds out and you're redistributing them, I can also take those multiple camera feeds and I can, because of 5G and that mobile edge compute, I can create an experience. Think about it as a multicam experience, which we've done for some of our sports partners, where now sitting in the stadium, I can not only watch what's appearing on the big screens, but I can also have a mobile experience where I can watch several different angles of a play. And I'll get that in virtual real time because I'm taking the same camera feeds that we're delivering to the home. We're packaging them back up using that mobile edge compute to create an experience and delivering that, hairpinning it right back into the stadium for those fans to experience. So what I've done now is I've created an alternative as part of their viewing experience inside the stadium that maybe gives them a better angle. Maybe it gives them an opportunity to watch a particular player. Maybe it gives them an opportunity to watch a particular execution of something, or any of a number of other things that they may choose or try to select. These are the type of use cases that we're seeing. Spectrum management, because of the complexity of the venue, the movement of video both in and out, and then caring for the fan inside those venues in a way that provides a unique experience for them.
네, 그럼 이번에는 5G 투자와 5G 서비스를 위한 파트너십과 협력 계획이 있으신지 궁금합니다.
So Verizon has a couple of different investment strategies. As you probably noted in the press, certainly from a 5G perspective, we just made a massive investment for spectrum in C-band spectrum, and that C-band spectrum will continue to open up new opportunities for us as we continue to deploy it, as it continues to roll off from satellite redeployment, and then that we can start to deploy it throughout the US. So our investments are core. We continue to do investments that are core to the expansion of 5G. And when we think about partnerships, and in particular investment in other companies, a lot of times we're trying to fill either a gap in our own portfolio, or we see an opportunity to go to market with a strategic partner because they also have a like mind approach in terms of how they're addressing the space, and we know that that partnership will be beneficial to both of us. We do try to identify those typical smaller companies where we can make significant investment in them. We are always looking for those opportunities. But for the most part, our investment strategy still remains, as north starred to 5G as possible. So when we think about, where it is that we can continue to develop the marketplace, it's always going to be focused in on either those partnerships or those investments, those the cooperation with other technology leaders that are going to give us a better position inside the market, address gaps in our portfolio, or as we look to the future, looking at what we think our needs will be or what the demand will be 1, 3, 5, 10 years out, and making sure that we're pacing those investments in a way that we meet the needs of our customers, and whether that's our direct consumers or the companies that serve those consumers, always in preparation for utilizing and more broadly 5G and mobile edge compute and all of those technologies, and we in a way that we know will deliver on the promise of the tech, that will deliver on the promise of what 5G and MEC really is. And inside the media and entertainment space, very specifically, that's really just about a new way of storytelling. And I think the way that Hans had put it in the keynote at CES, where we're just at the start of what we think is going to be a pretty exciting and very different environment as this technology continues to mature. I almost harken back and think about we're really at such an early stage. If you go and think about some of the major media milestones that have gone on for centuries, and you think about things like the printing press and that impact, and the radio and that impact, and television and that impact, I think 5G is yet another one of those huge, massive storytelling change events, and we are just starting on it. We haven't even begun to scratch the surface. And if you think about the four technologies I just talked about, those prior technologies, they were game shifters when it comes to storytelling. They were tremendous impacts socially. They drove and created new opportunities, environments, and all of that was just based on those kind of slow development of those technologies at the time, where society and industries were really looking for other ways to communicate. And 5G will be that next wave. And I think we're at just at the beginning of what will be a very exciting time, and will be a milestone that we'll look back in history about how it changed the way we communicate.
네, 한국 통신업계에서도 미디어 분야로의 확장을 미래 비즈니스 모델이라고 생각하고 많은 준비를 하고 있지만 아직까지는 가시적인 성과를 이루지는 못하고 있습니다. 저희보다는 먼저 다양한 시도를 해보신 입장에서 한국 통신업계의 탈통신 미디어 산업의 전환을 어떻게 생각하시는지요?
As you may have read, most recently we divested ourselves of our media assets, and there were quite a few reasons around that. Probably most importantly, with our focus on 5G, we did not see the media assets as core to what we were trying to achieve. We see ourselves as a technology enabler, more importantly. And staying close to being a technology enabler enables us to really provide the types of services and support and technical innovation to media companies, especially where media companies need that. We can be great partners with media companies without actually being in the media business. And when I think of some of the media companies today that are out there, and the largest and biggest names, your Amazon, your Netflix, your Googles, they've created a operating platform that really is compelling. And if you pin that against more traditional broadcasters who are really delivering, very competitive content, but they're doing it in a more structured and traditional legacy environment where they have a huge satellite distribution architecture, a lot of technical, I'll call it debt. And at the same time, those traditional broadcasters are also trying to break into those new platforms, the platforms that have been already deployed and are mature against the Netflix and the Amazons and the Apples of the world. And when you think about that, being able to have to deliver content in kind of this bifurcated manner, where I have a traditional audience that I'm caring for, and at the same time, I'm trying to build a streaming audience. I have a very heavy tech debt, legacy, infrastructure, capital that I'm spending. At the same time, I'd like to divert that capital to creating great and more compelling content. You put yourself in a very awkward position, and when we take a half step back from that, we see our space, being inside as a technology, as an innovator, as an enabler, that we can take a lot of that responsibility and a lot of that infrastructure commitment off of those traditional broadcasters while we're also enabling some of the streaming services. So the way to approach it in our view is really to be agnostic, because now I can work across and I can work with Amazon as we do, and I can work with Apple, and I can work with Netflix, and I can work with more traditional larger broadcasters. I can work with all of those players and not be competing with them. And I think that's the risk that you run when you start to move into an environment where you're doing both that technology enablement and you're also providing a competitive service. You find yourself, I think, at cross direction where you're compelled to build both of those industries, and you're competing with the broadcasters and the content creators and content distributors that you're also serving. And so for us, I think it was a very clear and easy choice. Let's divest ourselves of those assets. Let's neutralize any of those discussions. Let's be agnostic. Let's help other media companies achieve their results. We all benefit, and we'll stay in our core business. And if our core business is as a technology enabler, great, that's what we'll do. And if your core business is as a content provider, great, you'll do that. Together, we'll be able to achieve the results that the customers are looking for, which is that broader reach, the capability to be flexible across multiple platforms, and then allow those broadcasters to be able to reinvest their funds and their capital where it makes most sense. And that is investing in content creation. And just as we had talked earlier, our investment is going to be the same. We're going to continue to invest in 5G technology and enabling technology, and really building that marketplace to be a better enabler of great storytelling. We'll let the content providers be great storytellers. We'll be great partners in making sure that that story gets told.
네, 이제 마지막 질문이 될 것 같은데요. 버라이즌에서 준비 중인 혁신 기술이 더 있을까요?
So, across Verizon, we have gone through, quite a massive transformation over the past decade, where we moved away from just being solely a transport company, and providing telecommunications to really reimagining ourselves as a technology company. And I can tell you that part of that transformation is really to focus in on how do we create and deploy, identify new technologies and technologies that we can see that benefit both the consumer group as well as business groups and all of them. So when we think about those two sides of our customer, and a lot of that is the forward thinking of our strategy teams, really doing the right analysis and understanding exactly how they're seeing the maturity of different industries. And across that spectrum, we have spoken before about how we see the impact of 5G and a lot of innovation affecting everything from finance to healthcare to manufacturing to retail. And when you think broadly across all of those different industries, all those industries have unique value props and they have unique challenges. And the application of innovation and technology in each one of them, not only does it benefit the individual industry or the sector, but it also there's innovation that crosses over. So when we think about, how drones can be used in media and entertainment to capture news, we also think about the deployment of services. We also think about drones inside medical. We think about drones inside retail. We think about all of those different technologies. Our innovation teams are tasked with not only identifying where the market is going, but then looking at those smaller, more innovative companies as we do the type of investments that we do to nurture that and then bring those technologies in and give them kind of that mainstream opportunity to be developed, matured, and pushed out to benefit an industry. So we are constantly seeing, those new technologies bubble up. We're constantly innovating. We have a team that's dedicated just to innovation. They're isolated a little bit from the other business units, and that's purposeful. It's the ability to give them kind of that a startup look and a feel, the ability to give them kind of the opportunity to grow a business, to grow a marketplace without the burden of delivering, on hard dollars or hard commitment for revenue. We look at those as 1 to 5 year trajectories, and as long as we're continuing to play inside that mix, we know that will continue to be the engine that develops, new innovation that takes full advantage of the infrastructure that we're putting in place when we think about our North Star of 5G and MEC.
네, 끝으로 마무리 인사 부탁드리겠습니다.
I want to thank you again for inviting me to share some of my thoughts around 5G and broadcast and media. I appreciate the invitation from Korea Next Week, on Korea Next Media Week 2021. And on behalf of myself, Tim Stevens, and Verizon, 감사합니다.
네, 이른 아침부터 인터뷰에 응해주신 버라이즌 글로벌 부문 대표 팀 스티븐슨님께 감사드립니다.